Wanna get lucky? The Lucky O'Toole Vegas Adventure Series, Book 1, by Deborah Coonts. Narrated for you by Patricia Santamasso. Chapter 1. As her final act on this earth, Lyda Sue Stalnaker plummeted out of a Las Vegas helicopter and landed smack in the middle of the Pirates Lagoon in front of the Treasure Island Hotel, disrupting the 8:30 p.m. pirate show. The video ran as the lead-in for the 11 p.m. news. I caught it on a television in the sports bar. Actually, it was amazing I caught it at all. My name is Lucky O'Toole, and I am the chief problem solver at the Babylon, the newest, most over-the-top mega casino/resort on the Las Vegas Strip. I'd been fighting my way through the crowds packing the casino on my way to Stairwell 15 to deal with a naked man asleep under the stairs when I caught the television feed out of the corner of my eye. A grainy video of a helicopter with the Babylon script logo painted on the side appeared on the screen, with a small headshot of Lyda Sue in the corner. It was Lyda Sue's sweet smile that actually captured my attention. I leaned over the backs of two guys playing video poker at the bar, a sinking feeling in my stomach. In Vegas, nobody gets their picture on the news unless they've committed some grisly crime or have been a victim of one themselves. Of course, I couldn't hear what the talking heads on the television were saying. The clamor of excited voices from the casino, combined with the pinging from the video machines and the piped-in music to create a cacophony of excitement that made it not only impossible to talk, but to think as well. Eyes wide, I watched as the station ran the video again, this time the full version as part of their newscast. Hovering above the lagoon as the show began, the copter began to buck and roll. A body tumbled out, backward or forward, it was hard to tell. Thankfully, the final impact with the water was hidden behind the pirate ship advancing toward the British with cannons belching fire and smoke. The picture tilted, then went dark. A headshot of Lyda Sue taking its place.
Miss O'Toole?
My Nextel push-to-talk vibrated at my hip.
Are you coming?
I grabbed the device and pushed the direct connect button to shout, "What?" I pressed the thing to my ear as I tried to hear.
Ma'am, this is Sergio at the front desk. The doctor's with our naked guy. He's fine. Apparently sleeping off a bender. But we got another problem. Some guy in security by the name of Dane is insisting we call the paramedics just to be on the safe side.
I stared at Lyda Sue's picture on the television, my mind unable to process what I saw. The video switched to the police, and a body covered with a white cloth, one delicate hand dangling from the stretcher as they loaded it into the back of an ambulance. Nobody was in a hurry.
Ma'am, are you there?
The question snapped me back. Sorry, naked guy in the stairwell, right? Do not call the paramedics unless the doctor wants them. We don't need to cause a scene and have this guy splashed across the pages of the Review Journal in the morning. I'm sure he'd love that. Trying to steady my nerves, I took a deep breath. Instantly, I regretted it. Smoke-filled air assaulted my lungs, bringing tears to my eyes. I'll be right there, and I'll deal with Dane. I choked the words out as I struggled to catch my breath.
Yes, ma'am.
I reclipped the Nextel at my waist. I fought to not only clear my lungs, but to clear my thoughts as well. A Herculean task, as hundreds of questions pinged around inside my head. Lyda Sue, dead? I'd just seen her last night, holding forth on the end stool at Delilah's bar. We'd talked for a minute or two. Her world had seemed stable enough. 24 hours later, she took a header out of our helicopter, landing smack in the middle of the 8:30 p.m. pirate show. What had I missed? Damn. Lyda Sue was dead. Double damn, she fell out of our helicopter. The Babylon would be big news. My job was to keep the Babylon out of the news, or to take the fallout when I failed. The big boss was not going to be pleased. Tonight was shaping up to be a doozy. I muscled between the two guys intent on their video poker monitors and leaned across the bar so the bartender could hear me. Get the news off that television. Find a sports feed or something. The real world had no place in this fantasy land. My mind clicked into gear. I couldn't wait to get my hands on that pilot. He should have called me right away. Lida Sue hit the lagoon at 8:30. Damage control was tough enough without giving the news hounds and gossip mongers 2.5 hours head start. I had a feeling that nothing short of an overnight nuclear test at Yucca Flats would keep us out of the morning headlines now. Nevertheless, I grabbed the Nextel and started in. Jerry?
Yo.
Our head of security answered in his laid-back manner. I want our pilot in my office right now. Handcuff him and drag him there if you have to. Next, get over to Channel 8. I want all copies of a tape Marty ran on the 11 o'clock news of a woman falling out of our helicopter. If he refuses, remind him of that awkward little situation at the opening gala. He'll know what you're talking about. Bring the tapes to me when you get them.
I'm on it.
Oh, and Jer, I almost forgot. What's the status on the Mega Millions winner? Did she actually hit it?
We're working on it. I'll have an answer for you in the next half hour. Our plate's sort of full.
Welcome to the club. Thanks. I disconnected, then scrolled through the stored numbers looking for Dane's as I turned to head toward stairwell 15. Paramedics. Was the guy nuts? As fate would have it, his number didn't matter. 2 steps with my head down, focusing on my phone, and I ran smack into the rather solid chest of the man I was looking for, Paxton Dane, the new hire in security. At a couple of inches taller than my 6 feet, Dane was the poster boy for the testosterone-laden, ex-military jet jockey set. Square jaw, soft brown hair, green eyes, great ass, and an attitude, which I didn't need right now.
Did I just hear you tell Jerry to threaten to blackmail the manager of the television station?
His voice held the soft traces of old Texas, yet the sexy timbre of a man confident of his appeal. I never threaten. I offered him a deal. I had neither the time nor the patience to educate Dane tonight, but it seemed that was in the cards.
A rather fine distinction.
Dane, you'll find those black and white lines painted so brightly in the rest of the world, blurred to a nice shade of gray in Vegas. I put a hand on his chest and pushed him away, since his nearness seemed to affect what rational thought I had left at this time of night. I was already up to my ass in alligators, and the suicide dive just upped the ante. I really do have to go. I pushed away the images of Lida Sue's final moments. If I kept them at a distance, maybe, just maybe, I could make it through the night. If I spoke of her cavalierly, maybe I could hold back my emotions.
What makes you think she was a suicide?
The soft traces of old Texas disappeared. Dane's voice was hard, flat, and held an edge like tempered steel. The question and his tone stopped me cold. What did he know that I didn't? You got any reason to think otherwise? Murder. Now that would be a real problem. He waved my question away, arranging his features in an expressionless mask.
I need to talk to you about one of our whales. Apparently, the guy had a mishap in one of the Ferraris. If you want me to handle it, I can. But you'll have to make the call as to what the hotel is willing to do. The whale in question is...
He consulted a folded sheet of paper he had extracted out of his back pocket and gave a low whistle.
Mr. Fujikara. And he seems to be quite a whale. He keeps several million in play during his monthly visits.
I know Mr. Fujikara well. Dane glanced up, one eyebrow raised, but he didn't ask the question I saw lurking there, and I felt no need to explain.
We also have a Pasquarelli. Apparently, he wants a hug from you,
Dane continued, not missing a beat as he absently rubbed his chest where my hand had been.
And the naked guy.
He's all mine as well, I interjected to speed up the conversation. With major problems to solve, I had little time and even less patience. And Dane, for the record, never call the paramedics unless it's an all-out emergency or the doctor wants them. Casinos are closed worlds here. We protect our own, and we zealously guard the privacy of our guests. Remember that. Outsiders are allowed in to help with problems only, and I repeat, only, when the problem gets out of hand. Dane's eyes narrowed, his only response. A tick worked in his cheek. I rolled my head and rubbed the back of my neck. I need to take Mr. Fujikara as well. This is a game we play. For his millions, he likes some personal attention. Apparently, I'm the anointed one. You can help me with one thing, though. We had a lady hit the Mega Million, but we need to make sure she played the 6 quarters. Jerry's shut down the machine and is reviewing the tapes. While we're in the process, why don't you offer the Sodom and Gomorrah suite to the winner and her friends for the night? Make double sure that she understands her winnings have not been confirmed. I'll follow up with her when I get the results of the diagnostics from Jerry.
And who will authorize the comped suite?
I thought I just did. My words sounded harsher than I intended. Sorry. If Sergio wants confirmation, have him call me.
Right. Oh, and the big boss wants 15 minutes of your time. He's in his apartment.
He'll have to get in line.
He told me now,
Dane said as he rubbed his eyes. I said he'll have to wait. Now that I took a closer look, Dane's eyes were bloodshot. The guy looked totally wrung out. I put a hand on his arm. Are you okay?
Fine.
Dane shrugged my question off, then shrugged out of my grasp.
You leave the big boss hanging. It's your funeral.
It'll take more than that to put me 6 feet under. My relationship with the big boss was none of Dane's business. I turned and took off through the casino, with more questions than answers bouncing around in my skull. Why the swan dive? Why did the big boss send Dane to bring me to heel? And why did Dane sidestep my question? Murder. What made him think Lyda Sue was murdered? The casino at the Babylon is much like any other. An intimate labyrinth, subtly decorated, windowless, and, tonight, jam-packed with people all paying and praying for whatever it was they hoped to get in Vegas. A thin layer of smoke hovered over the crowd as the slot machines sang their come-on songs and occasional shouts arose from the tables. Cocktail waitresses wearing painted-on smiles and little else darted in and out, delivering fresh libations and collecting the empties. Young women paraded around in tight-fitting clothes they wouldn't be caught dead in back home. Pierced and tattooed young men, their jeans hanging precariously across their butts, followed the young women. How the boys kept their jeans from falling straight to the floor was an enduring mystery. The nightly line of the young and beautiful snaked from the entrance to Pandora's Box, our popular nightclub and body exchange. Pulses of dance music escaped each time Ralph, our bouncer, opened the door to let one of the hip and trendy in or out. The entrance to the adjacent theater was empty. The 10:30 show was well underway. I knew where to find Mr. Pasquarelli. Thankfully, he was on my way to Stairwell 15. Like all serious gamblers, Mr. Pasquarelli was a creature of habit and superstition. Dressed in the same shirt, now a threadbare Hawaiian number his wife Mildred, God rest her soul, had given him decades ago, when I guessed he weighed 40 pounds more than he did now, he always started his night of play at the 3rd slot machine from the end of the 3rd row. A gnome-like 80, Mr. Pasquarelli was cute as a bug, bald as Michael Jordan, a night owl, and, I suspected, a bit lonely. 3 was his lucky number, and I was his good luck charm. Lucky me. Truth be told, giving Mr. Pasquarelli his hug was usually the high point of my night, a fact that, had I had time to think about it, would probably have concerned me.
There you are, my dear.
He waved his glass at me.
I was beginning to worry.
Worry? Don't be silly. But this one will have to be a quickie. I gave him a squeeze, careful not to crush him too tightly. He laughed at the innuendo.
Hard night?
You don't know the half of it.
Little Lyda taking a header out of the helicopter?
Bad news travels fast. You knew Lyda Sue?
Sure. When she wasn't busy, she used to pull up a stool and talk to me for a while. Sweet kid. From somewhere in Texas, I think.
He shook his head and crinkled his brow.
She'd been sort of jumpy lately.
Did she say why?
If she did, I don't remember.
Do me a favor. Try. When she sailed out of that helicopter, she landed right in my lap. I could use some help on this. He nodded, his eyes serious. I patted Mr. Pasquarelli's shoulder. Go easy on us tonight, okay?
Sure, honey,
he said with a wink. Mr. Pasquarelli was the only man on the planet who could call me honey, wink at me, and live to tell about it. I dove into the crowd and wove my way on toward stairwell 15. I threw my weight against the stairwell door and came face to face with the normally unflappable Sergio Fabiano, our night shift front desk manager. Dark hair, olive skin, a face a photographer would love, and a body to match, Sergio was the Babylon's resident Greek god. Women were drawn to him like sharks to an injured seal. Thankfully, the women were nowhere in sight. Neither was security. Apparently, Dane had done as I asked and called off his posse.
Thank heavens.
A scowl creased Sergio's otherwise flawless face, but his dark eyes danced with merriment. He gestured disdainfully toward the space under the first flight of stairs. Good God! The words escaped before I could stop them.
But not a merciful god, announced Sergio.
Our naked guest must have weighed 400 pounds, with pasty white skin and more hair sprouting on his body than his head. Thankfully, he was curled in the fetal position, and he was still out cold. But judging from the way his ass was twitching, his dreams were good ones. We don't know who he is? I managed to choke out. I kept repeating, I will not laugh at this, over and over in my head until I felt confident I would do as I told myself. Sergio shook his head, his jaw clamped tight, his lips compressed together. He didn't laugh, not even a smile, or a smirk. Amazing. I keyed my Nextel. Security, any missing person reports for tonight?
Excuse me?
The unmistakable voice of Paxton Dane. Did the guy ever stop? Like the Energizer Bunny, he just kept going and going, handling everything, everywhere. Dane, have you guys had any calls from anyone looking for someone who matches the description of our guy in stairwell 15?
Already checked that. And to answer your question, no.
Okay, then send 4... I looked at the inert shape again. Make that 5 of your strongest guys to stairwell 15, ground floor.
On their way. Again.
Taking the high road, I ignored the jab. And Dane, remember, a bit of discretion here. This man is most likely one of our guests. We wouldn't want to see him on the news, okay?
You mean one appearance on the nightly news is enough?
Did the guy take a class on how to be a jerk, or was it something that just came naturally? Dane, I started in on him, then realized I was talking to dead air. Sergio looked at me, his eyes round black saucers. I snapped my phone shut. Sergio, take care of this guy, I said as I reclipped my phone, glad that Dane had retreated. I was too wrung out to do the whole verbal thrust and parry thing. You know, the usual routine.
Right,
Sergio began.
First, get a robe that'll fit him, preferably one with another hotel's logo on it.
He paused to flash me a grin, then continued as if he'd memorized it all from the employee handbook and hadn't actually learned it from me.
When security gets here, have them carry him through the back corridors to the worst room open tonight. Take all the bed sheets, the towels, and the robes, anything he can put around himself when he wakes up, so he can't sneak out on us.
You've got it. But you might see if security can spare someone to stand outside the door, just in case our friend, I pointed to the guy on the floor, now snoring loudly, has an accomplice to bring him some clothes. Sergio nodded. And the doc is going to check on him? I asked.
Every half hour.
Good work. Another problem down. How many more to go? I'd lost count. Sergio, another thing. Again, those black eyes focused on me. I need you to alert your staff at the front desk, the bell staff, and the valets. If anyone comes around asking questions about a girl falling out of our helicopter, they are to be directed to my office. That includes the police. Our staff is not to answer any questions or give any information. Is that clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Sergio's eyes grew a fraction wider, but he kept his composure. And if anyone is poking around, let me know, okay? Just because you send them to my office doesn't mean they will actually do as you suggest. I gave one last look around. I couldn't think of anything else. Satisfied Sergio could handle the problem from here, I turned to go. After all, it's not as if this was our first naked drunk sleeping in a stairwell. The elevators lurked just inside the foyer of the Babylon, separating the casino from the hotel. The foyer was the Babylon's showpiece. Designed to draw all passers-by inside, the grand ceiling was covered with millions of dollars worth of Chihuly-blown glass. The Bellagio had glass flowers, we had butterflies and hummingbirds. Thousands of them. Personally, they made me feel like we were all in a remake of the film The Birds. But obviously no one shared my opinion. As usual, a crowd clustered around them, oohing and eyeing. Numerous walking bridges arched over a lazy river, our interpretation of the Euphrates, which snaked throughout the ground level. Tropical plants and trees grew along its banks, lending shade for the colorful fish, swans, and ducks that swam in the clear blue water. Somehow, I doubted whether the birthplace of civilization ever had a river quite like our Euphrates, but the big boss wanted it, so there it was. Off to one side of the lobby, behind a wall of 25-foot windows, an indoor ski slope with real, man-made snow descended from high above. Again, I wasn't sure whether the original Babylonians had ever strapped on a pair of K2s and flown down a snow-covered hillside. But in keeping with the relatively recent adage, if you build it, they will come, the big boss had built it, and, indeed, they came. Another crowd gathered there, watching the folks who had paid an exorbitant sum to ski indoors on the desert slide down the hill. The other side of the lobby boasted the entrance to the bazaar. There one could slide behind the wheel of a Ferrari, buy a $600,000 pink diamond ring, a $2,000 pair of Versace jeans, or load up on $500 Jimmy Choos. A constant line of customers with fat wallets trailed through there like ants bearing gifts for the queen. The big boss was an expert at separating tourists from their money. Ah, yes, the big boss. He was next on the list. I shouldered my way through the crowd, ignoring the man yelling at one of the bellmen. A front desk clerk was already interceding. Paxton Dane was giving a woman a hug, probably the Mega Millions lady. He caught my eye over the lady's shoulder and gave me a discreet thumbs up. From this brief moment in time, we appeared to have things under control, which, of course, was an illusion. Life in Vegas was never under control. It walked, trotted, or galloped as it chose, and we merely hung on for the ride. Tomorrow, the trendmakers would arrive for their annual week of spouse swapping. The stars of the adult movie industry would descend on us for their annual awards ceremony. Electronicon started Tuesday, and I would have to deal with the fallout from Lyda Sue's dramatic exit, which would surely hit not only the morning papers, but the internet as well. Whoever thought up the tagline, "What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas," got it backward. Vegas was always news. Heck, the video of Lyda Sue's final dive was probably playing on YouTube by now. I was a fool to think I could corral this one. I rounded the corner, pushed the up button, and pondered the reflection that stared back at me from the mirrored surface of the elevator doors. I looked like 100 miles of bad road. Barely over 30, and I could pass for my mother's sister. Haggard was the word that leapt to mind. Thankfully, the doors slid open, and I was no longer nose to nose with myself. Why people want mirrors everywhere is beyond me. I stepped inside the empty car, inserted my security card in the slot, and pressed the button marked Private. Self-consciously, I patted my bottle blonde hair, my one concession to the land of the beautiful people. Attractive enough, I guess, I'd never be considered beautiful or buxom, at least not without serious surgical intervention, but I damn well could be tall and blonde. Self-consciously, I smoothed my dress, pinched my cheeks to get some color into them, then wiped at the black smudges I had seen under my eyes. I threw back my shoulders and adopted what I thought was an air of confidence. "Who you trying to fool?" The voice emanating from the ceiling startled me. I looked up at the eye in the sky, the small video camera hidden discreetly in a plastic bubble partially recessed into the ceiling of the elevator car. Security monitored the video feeds from thousands of similar devices located all over the property. The voice belonged to Vivian Rainwater, one of our security team. "You know what they say, image is everything." I forced a smile for the camera. "I'll be unavailable for a few." "You go, girl." "Over the line, Viv." I thought there weren't any lines in Vegas, just shades of gray. "And you shouldn't listen to conversations you're not invited into. You'd be amazed at what you see and hear up here." Not long ago, I had sat where Vivian now sits and received a quick lesson into my fellow man, one I assume Vivian was now learning. Titillated? Maybe. Amused? Possibly. But amazed? No. Now go away and spy on someone else. The elevator whirred seamlessly to a stop at the 52nd floor, and the doors slid open. Every time I made this ride, I thought of Dorothy leaving Kansas in a tornado and waking up in Oz. 30 seconds, and I was transported from the semi-controlled chaos of the lobby to the quiet, serene living room of the big boss's penthouse. The muted lights cast a warm glow on leather-finished walls. The rich sheen of the hardwood floors framed hand-knotted silk rugs from the Middle East. Each was tastefully arranged and supported a cluster of understated furniture made from the hides of exotic beasts and woods from faraway lands. Lesser works from some of the great masters graced the walls, sketches by Picasso and smaller works by Van Gogh and Monet. I couldn't identify the others. Apparently, my high school art history teacher had overlooked them, but I was sure they were all very expensive and important. The whole effect made a 3,000-square-foot box of a room cozy. The big boss stood silhouetted against the wall of 20-foot windows, backlit by the lights of the strip below. He warmed his hands in front of a gas fire, dancing merrily in a freestanding fireplace. He explained to me once that he kept the air conditioning on full blast so he could have his fire. Something about the ambiance. The big boss, Albert Rothstein, was a Vegas legend. He had started as a valet at the Flamingo, caught the mob's attention, he never would tell me exactly how, and then worked his way to the top of the heap. A short man with a full head of once black, now salt and pepper hair, he kept himself trim with thrice-weekly personal training sessions. His smile could light up a room, and his manner made you feel like you were the most important person in his world. He had a penchant for stiff whiskey, tall blondes, and big steaks. When I was 15, I'd filled out an employment application, stating my age as 18. The big boss hired me on the spot, even though he had known I was lying. More than a little peeved at being summoned through the new flunky, I started in as I strode toward him. "Lyda Sue made a hell of a splash, but I've got everything under control. Jerry's on his way to get the tape from the station. The front entrance staff has been alerted to direct all inquiries to me, and once I actually make it to my office, I'll work on keeping us off the front page." I stopped in front of him, but the big boss didn't look at me. Instead, he continued staring into the fire. Then he reached into his back pocket, extracted his wallet, and pulled out what I knew to be a $100 bill. He put his wallet back, then started working with the paper money, smoothing it, lining up the sides, meticulously folding it again and again. The silence stretched between us. Then he finally said, "Bring all the copies of the video to me." "You don't want security to go over it? May I ask why?" Now he eyed me over the top of his reading glasses, perched on the end of his nose. His eyes were red. He looked like hell. "For once, just do as I say." "Okay." First Lyda Sue, then Dane, now the big boss. Had I suddenly stepped into the Twilight Zone? Nothing about this night added up. Aren't you interested in what the pilot has to say?
The pilot?
He repeated, as if stalling for time. The pilot's story should be a doozy. His hands shook as he folded the bill over and over.
Of course. What did Willie have to say?
Okay, now I was sure I smelled a rat. How did you know it was Willie? We haven't found him yet. The air seemed to go right out of the big boss. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and let it out slowly.
Lucky, you can truly try a man's soul.
And you're stonewalling me. I laid a hand on his arm. Boss, it's my job to solve problems, but I can't do it unless I know what the problems are.
I was solving problems long before you showed up. This one's mine. I'll solve it myself, my own way.
He shrugged out of my grasp. The second man tonight to do that. Clearly I was losing my touch.
Just bring me that tape and keep me in the loop,
he growled, looking like a pit bull ready to take a bite out of somebody's ass. I had no idea how to reason with a pit bull, assuming it could even be done, so I bailed. You're the boss. Anything else? If I couldn't go through him, I'd just go around him. Again, the silence stretched between us as he worked, folding and folding. Finished, he took my hand and closed my fingers around the small shape. He didn't let go. His eyes looked at our hands, then reluctantly met mine.
Trust me on this one.
Sure. I looked at the shape in my palm. The big boss had folded the bill into a small elephant. I extracted my hands from his and dropped the figure into my pocket. Look, right now I got more fires than California in the fall, and they are spreading by the minute. May I go now?
Give that to the first kid you see in the lobby.
His voice was tired, his eyes distracted. Boss, it's midnight. If there are any kids around, somebody ought to call child services.
Right.
He stepped around me and headed toward the bar.
Tomorrow, then.
He pulled a bottle of single malt off the shelf and raised it in my direction. I shook my head. He poured himself a drink. He raised the glass to his lips, took a long pull, and then said,
We've got another problem.
That much I knew. In fact, I thought we had several. And what might that be?
Paxton Dane?
Now that I didn't expect. The big boss turned and stared at me, apparently awaiting my response. If I didn't know better, I'd say he seemed nervous, a little antsy even, as he shifted from foot to foot. A cold chill went through me. Whatever was bothering him, it must be bad, real bad. I'd only seen the big boss this way once before, and we both darn near went down in flames. He was your hire. What's the problem? How I kept my voice even, I don't know.
I hired Dane so we could keep an eye on him,
the big boss said, his eyes drifting from mine. For a moment, I was speechless, unable to comprehend what he just told me. Then I found my voice. Wait, let me get this straight. You put somebody you don't trust in one of the most sensitive positions in the house? Do you think that's wise? I tried to keep my voice low, my tone smooth, but even I could detect a hint of panic around the edges.
Probably not, but it was the best I could think of on the fly.
The boss took a slug of scotch.
Jerry knows. He's keeping tabs on Dane, and I want you to help him.
Why?
He asked too many questions and was snooping around like he was trailing after something, or someone. It doesn't seem hiring him has put him off the scent. I want to know what he's looking for and who's holding his reins, so keep him close, okay?
Why me? I'm not in security. I'm the customer relations person, remember?
I know it's asking a lot.
He turned, his eyes locked onto mine.
But Lucky, you're the only one I can trust.
Chapter 2. Tonight's pilot would have to be Willie the Weasel. I fumed as I rode the elevator down from the big boss's suite. As far as I knew, I was the only person who referred to Willie as the Weasel. But knowing Willie, there were probably hundreds, if not thousands out there who felt the same way I did. We had history, the Weasel and me. As my mother was so fond of pointing out, the Weasel had been one of those learning experiences. I learned all right. If I had to do it over again, I would have shot him and put him out of my misery. Unfortunately, I hadn't been smart enough to shoot the Weasel, and now I had to find him. The big boss was stonewalling me. I'd been reduced to Paxton Dane's babysitter, and now the Weasel was back in my life. What a great night this was turning out to be. I had worked myself into a lather when my phone rang, interrupting my pity party. I grabbed the offending device from its perch on my hip, flipped it open, and snarled, "O'Toole?" I didn't look at the caller's number first. Big mistake. "Lucky, you're never going to catch a man with a bark like that." My mother's voice was flat, emotionless, authoritative, and just enough to push me over the edge. "Mother, you make dating sound like the greased pig contest at the state fair. That's not fair to the pigs. Besides, my bite is worse than my bark. I know some nice men I could introduce you to." Even after all these years, she refused to quit. "Mother, the men you know are not nice. They pay for sex." "You're way too picky, honey." "It's my cross to bear." The elevator doors opened on the mezzanine. I stepped out and took a few steps to the railing of the balcony overlooking the lobby. "It's pretty late for a social call, Mother. Everything okay?" I thought I heard a sniffle. "Mother, are you crying?" My mother never cried. She made other people cry. "Oh, Lucky. I saw the news. Poor Lida Sue. And it's all my fault." Mother really was crying. She had my full attention now. "How could it be your fault?" I leaned against the railing and watched the sea of people below. "Lida Sue quit working for you some time ago." Mother took a deep, ragged breath. "Oh, Lucky. You're going to be so mad at me." I shut my eyes and counted to 10. It didn't work. I was still mad. "Mother, I'm not sure you could make this night any worse, so why don't you just give it to me straight?" "Well, a couple of months ago, Lida Sue came out here and asked me if I would bend the rules for her a little bit." "How little?" I had a real bad feeling I knew what was coming. "She said she had a big fish, a real high-profile guy, and he didn't want to be seen meeting her, so I let her meet him here." "And you didn't check him out, right?" "It was Lida Sue, honey. She'd never gotten into any trouble before, and she was one of my favorites. She always came to visit and cheer up this old lady, unlike somebody else I know." Guilt doesn't work with me, Mother. Taking a call from Mother was like stabbing myself in the leg with a sharp knife. Extraordinarily painful, but not life-threatening. "So you have no idea who he was, and nobody there saw him?" "No, but I do know each time he met her here, he arrived in the Babylon's helicopter." "Okay, I was wrong. She could make my night worse." "Tell you what, Mother. Why don't I come for lunch tomorrow, and you can tell me all about this then?" "That would be wonderful. Will you bring a bow with you?" "Mother, give it a rest." "You know, Lucky, your Aunt Matilda was right. We should have had sons. They're much nicer than daughters." For years, I'd been telling the big boss that to have an office for me was a waste of time. All I needed was my Nextel and a pair of track shoes. He'd responded that maybe that was so, but my assistant needed a little corner of the world to call her own, and we couldn't very well put her in the lobby. Unable to think up a pithy reply, I caved. I had to admit, though, the office he shamed me into using was a better place to store my stuff than an employee locker. Consisting of an outer reception area policed by my assistant, Miss Patterson, a small kitchenette, and a room where I stored my stuff and pretended to be important, my office occupied a section of the mezzanine level. With its wall of windows overlooking the lobby, I felt as if I were living life trapped behind glass, like a snake at the zoo. just another of the many attractions at the Babylon. Miss Patterson, on the other hand, loved it, and ran her own little fiefdom from her desk in the outer office, her very own pulpit of power. From there, she corralled all of the worker bees, wayward guests, occasional disgruntled losers, reporters looking for a juicy tidbit, gaming inspectors, policemen and women, and anyone else who wanted a moment of my time. I'd inherited Miss Patterson from my counterpart at one of the big boss's lesser properties. I was less than impressed when I met her. 50-ish and frumpy, she dressed as if she had given in to getting older. In Vegas, that was tantamount to a cardinal sin. Every day she hid her body under a long skirt, oversized blouse, and tattered sweater. She wore her salt and pepper hair in short, soft curls framing her round, impish face. All in all, she didn't exactly inspire confidence. I never suspected she possessed the most finely tuned bullshit meter of anyone I'd ever met. Looking back on it, I would have been money ahead had I paid her twice what she asked. She was waiting for me just inside the outer door with a cup of hot coffee and a frown. 2 Metro detectives are in your office, she said. They wouldn't tell me what they wanted. She sniffed, as if the snub was a personal affront. I took the proffered coffee and inhaled deeply, savoring the vanilla nut aroma, then sipped. Hot, but not enough to take my skin off, so I drank deeply. I couldn't remember the last time I'd eaten. A headache was forming just behind my right eye. I hoped the caffeine would help. If Pierce Brosnan walked in here and wouldn't give you the time of day, I'd understand you being miffed and fairly disappointed. But 2 of Vegas's finest? I made a rude noise with my lips. I didn't even get a smile. She was one tough audience. And the reporters? Several have called. As usual, I've given them the standard, "This is an ongoing investigation, we don't know anything yet," and referred them to Metro. What does this place need me for? To handle the police, she deadpanned. Thanks. I noticed Miss Patterson looked as tired as I felt. It's late. You should go home. I'll go when you go. I think she harbored the secret opinion that I couldn't do my job without her. And, secretly, I agreed with her. Oh, and Jerry dropped off a package, which I put in your purse, she added. I nodded. So, Marty had seen the light. Now I owed him a big favor. Girded by the jolt of caffeine and a sense of impending doom, I opened the door to my inner office and stepped inside. Both detectives turned at my greeting. One stood at my wall of windows, legs spread, hands on hips, surveying the activity in the lobby below. The other, much younger detective, held one of the photographs from my credenza. He hastily replaced it. A sheepish grin briefly split his face, then disappeared. He had been holding my favorite photograph, a black and white picture that showed a 4-year-old me and my mom with Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. Dean Martin held me as I smiled and reached for the camera. In short shorts, with one of her heels kicked up, my mother had thrown her arms playfully around Sammy Davis's neck. She was beautiful, so young and full of life. Another time and place. Both of the cops were dressed as if they'd come straight from the set of one of those police dramas on television. Cheap suits, rumpled jackets, and serious expressions. We're looking for your helicopter pilot who was on duty tonight, said the older one. I assume you know why? And you are? Detective Richards. He reached inside his jacket and pulled out a badge, which he flashed. Then he pulled out a business card and shoved it at me. He jerked his head at the young guy. That's Detective Romeo. I looked at the younger one. He must have seen my amusement, as his face flushed crimson, and I instantly felt like a pig. I was ashamed of myself, sort of. It was late. I was tired. My head hurt. And I'm shallow. I find amusement where I can. I turned back to Detective Richards in time to watch his gaze wander from my face, down my body, then back again, apparently missing the fact that my eyes had turned into little slits at his obvious undressing. We were told you might be able to help us, He sounded dubious. I work mainly the on-property problems. Young women jumping to their deaths at another hotel are a bit out of my purview. The truth, but not the whole truth.
So, you won't help us?
Can't help you. I haven't a clue where the pilot is. Believe me, I'm looking for him myself. I could feel the detective's eyes follow me as I moved behind my desk and sat down. The guy was starting to creep me out. Still, as far as creeps go, he was a bench warmer in the minor leagues. I played in the majors. I'd come up through the ranks of violently drunk customers with projectile vomiting, groping hands, and foul mouths, plus card sharps, thieves, petty thugs, mashers, and various other minor criminals. Just imagining this pompous detective dealing with the vomiters made me smile. That clearly wasn't the reaction Richards expected. He glowered at me. Romeo shifted nervously from one foot to the other, his eyes fixed on his partner, as if watching for his cue. I was wondering if I was going to get the whole good cop, bad cop thing, which semi-amused me. But then I decided I was too beat to stick around and play. Gentlemen, I'm tired. I have a headache. And, I motioned with my arm toward the wall of glass, out there is a hotel and casino full of problems, all of which I have to address before I get to call it a night.
So, you won't tell us where the helicopter pilot is? Detective Richards asked again.
I told you, I have no idea. Why don't you try the dispatch operator? He or she may know more. You'll find the dispatch desk in guest services. Detective Romeo pulled out a pad and started taking notes.
And the video of the suicide? Did you know the television station apparently taped over it after it ran on the 11 o'clock news?
Detective Richards continued. Erased? Too bad. Bless you, Marty. Good thing for me. Lying by omission wasn't a capital offense in Nevada. At least I didn't think it was. Now, please, if that's all you want, you're talking to the wrong gal.
You're not being very helpful,
said Detective Romeo. I turned to look at him. He shrank back, then reddened again. Apparently he was smarter than his partner and noticed my slitty eyes. My contract says I don't have to be helpful after midnight. I spoke slowly, then smiled and batted my eyes at him. I know. I should pick on someone my own size. After midnight, I have no self-control.
You tell us if you find him, Detective Richards said in his best do-as-I-say manner. You have my card.
If I find him, I'll tell him you're looking for him. For a moment, I held the detective's steady gaze. Then I stood and moved toward the door. Gentlemen, if you please, I'm needed in Delilah's bar. I opened the door and ushered them out. Once the door had closed behind the detectives, I paused at Miss Patterson's desk long enough to kick off the flats I had been wearing and grab a pair of killer Jimmy Choos she kept stashed for me in her bottom drawer. With their delicate silver straps and 6-inch heels, they were the best knock-me-down-and-fuck-me shoes I owned. The phone rang incessantly. All 3 lines were lit. We both ignored it. Have the dispatcher call me on my cell. I sank into one of the chairs across from Miss Patterson's desk. She grabbed a notebook and pen as I tried to stuff my already tired and swollen feet into the strappy shoes. I told Jerry to keep Willie in security, but now that the police have gone, tell Jerry the minute Willie shows his face around here, I want him strung up by the balls and brought to me. I'm going to hang him on a spit and roast him over an open fire. The mental image of a well-done Willie brought a smile to my face. I tightened the straps on the shoes. Then I arranged my décolletage to show a bit more cleavage. Fuck me shoes and cleavage. The perfect costume for my part in Mr. Fujikara's production. Tell operations 2 detectives are on their way to dispatch. Get rid of them quickly, and for God's sake don't let them run into Willie, assuming, of course, we actually find the bastard. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. My mind was whirling. See if Felicia Riley is working tonight. She's a cocktail waitress and usually works in the high-stakes room, the same place Lyda Sue worked. Miss Riley is Willie's latest conquest. If she's on the property, I want to see her in my office in 30 minutes. I paused to let Miss Patterson, who scribbled fast, catch up. Then see if you can find the beautiful Jeremy Whitlock.
The beautiful Jeremy Whitlock?
Miss Patterson's normal dour expression brightened. Did Miss Patterson harbor a secret crush? I nodded. I'd probably have a crush on him too, but I'd sworn off men. They were all pigs and to be pitied. Nobody ever referred to the private investigator as just Jeremy. He was always the beautiful Jeremy Whitlock. And, I had to admit, the name fit. See if he can come by tomorrow afternoon. With both shoes firmly strapped on, I grabbed the edge of the desk as I carefully rose to my feet. Wearing high heels had never been my forte. Walking in them even less so. I took a tentative step, then another, gaining confidence by the time I reached the door and pulled it open. I had made it to the elevator when my Nextel spoke my name. I pulled it from its holster and pushed the direct connect button. O'Toole?
Miss O'Toole? This is Ben Hawkins in guest services. I worked dispatch tonight. Miss Patterson told me you wanted to talk to me.
I didn't know Ben. He sounded young. His voice shook. I couldn't be that scary, could I? Yes, Ben. Thanks for calling so quickly. I stepped into the waiting elevator, thankful to have a wall to lean against. Normally, I took the stairs. The casino level was only one flight down. But not tonight. Not in these shoes. Have you guys had any luck locating William, the helicopter pilot?
I wish. The whole world wants to talk to him. I keep calling him on the radio. I've even tried to sell, but he doesn't respond.
I knew the answer, but I had to ask. Why are you calling him? Isn't he back yet?
He never came back.
Ever hopeful, I asked. Does the FAA have any reports of a crash nearby?
No, ma'am.
Bummer. Of course Willie couldn't have just crashed and burned, saving me the trouble of tracking him down. He never was helpful that way. I glanced at my watch. 12:35 a.m. A bit under 4 hours since Lyda Sue hit the lagoon. I didn't know how much fuel Willie'd had on board the helicopter, but it couldn't have been more than 3 hours worth. I thought I remembered Willie explaining they usually went light on the fuel so they could carry more paying customers. Willie the Weasel had vanished, and he took our friggin' helicopter. As the elevator doors opened and I headed for Delilah's bar, a wall of sound hit me. The night in full swing, gaggles of folks wandered about, drinks clutched tightly. Of course, it could have been any time of day or night in the windowless, hermetically sealed casino. Casinos are designed to trap gamblers and keep them wagering until they dropped, and, in our case, that strategy seemed to be working. With flashing lights, snippets of music, and an occasional siren, the slot machines vied with each other for players. The tables were all in play, with people packed at least 2 deep around each. Other folks wandered between the tables and the machines. Glasses in hand, they ogled the other wanderers, apparently looking for a different kind of entertainment. Energy shimmered off the crowd. The air was so full of smoke, it amazed me anyone could breathe the stuff and actually survive. My eyes watered, and my lungs screamed. Ah, Vegas. So, how was I going to find a missing helicopter? I hadn't a clue, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. Vegas was a tiny oasis in a vast desert. The Weasel could have refueled and be halfway to LA by now. Think, O'Toole. How would the FAA look for a missing aircraft? I had no idea, but I knew who might. As I navigated toward the bar, I keyed my Nextel. To be heard over the din, I held it close to my mouth. Dane, are you there? His response was quick.
This is Dane. Over.
Lucky here.
Lucky me.
Truer words were never spoken. You're a pilot, right? I thought I remembered Jerry telling me something about Dane's military service that included flying. I hoped I remembered right.
Yeah.
Would you have any idea how to find a missing helicopter?
I'm already on it. I figured the guy might get scared and bolt. I put in a few calls and I'm waiting to hear back. Shouldn't be long. Can you give me 15 minutes or so and I'll get back to you?
Sure. I'll be in Delilah's with Mr. Fujikara.
Roger.
Delilah's bar was a comfy oasis set on a raised platform smack in the middle of the casino. Here, surrounded by palm trees and trellises of trailing bougainvillea, one could rest from the rigors of wagering, slake thirst, fortify resolve, and hit the ATM. The stench of the tropical flowers diluted the natural, organic purity of the cigarette aroma and hit me in the face as I teetered up the steps. Someone had definitely gone a bit overboard on the flowers. Mr. Fujikara and his 3 friends rose as I approached. They were all short men. In these heels, their eyes were level with my chest. I think that was part of the game we played. Standing there, surrounded by short men, reminded me of junior high school. I was an Amazon, and everyone else, especially the boys, were pygmies. I stifled that familiar feeling of awkwardness as I dropped into a small bow. Mr. Fujikara, how nice to see you again.
Miss O'Toole,
he said, as he bowed in return, then motioned to the chair next to his.
Please sit.
Mr. Fujikara introduced his friends as I took my seat. I nodded to each in turn. I noticed they were well into a second bottle of wine. Are you enjoying yourselves? A smile spread across Mr. Fujikara's face.
The suite is magnificent. From the balcony, we can see all the way up the strip, and the service has been impeccable.
I reached over and touched his knee, then leaned into him. I'm so glad you're satisfied. I turned toward Mr. Fujikara's friends. Mr. Fujikara is a very important guest of ours. Of mine. I gave him a smile and squeezed his arm. And you like the wine?
It is sublime.
He beamed.
But I think now your presence calls for a bottle of champagne.
His eyes twinkled.
What do you think? Perhaps a nice bottle of Dom Perignon?
I smothered a smile. Mr. Fujikara was going to play this for all it was worth. I thought for a moment. The insurance deductible and the value of lost rental time on the Ferrari would run $6 or $7 grand, so I could afford to give him a couple of bottles of $400 wine, a $500 bottle of bubbly, and a bit of attention. Of course. Perhaps the 95?
Splendid.
I motioned to the waitress hovering nearby. Kimmy, a bottle of the 1995 Dom Perignon, please, and 4 glasses.
You're not going to celebrate with us?
Asked one of Mr. Fujikara's friends. Unfortunately, my workday isn't over. I sighed dramatically. It's been a very long day, and I still must see to the Ferrari. Mr. Fujikara's smile disappeared. A look of concern replaced it.
Yes, the car. So silly of the valet to injure such a fine piece of machinery.
I nodded.
I had driven it to Carne, the steakhouse on Charleston Boulevard. I'm sure it was fine when I brought it back.
I am sorry, I said with as much sympathy as I could muster.
Will your boss be angry?
Most likely.
Will he be angry at you?
He does hold me accountable for these sorts of transgressions. We both knew it was a lie, but that was part of the game. Mr. Fujikara puffed out his chest in indignation.
Well, we can't have that. I will pay for the car.
We both knew he was only agreeing to pay the few grand of the deductible, a paltry sum in his world, but his friends probably didn't know that. Oh, Mr. Fujikara, do you mean it? I reached over and grabbed his hand in both of mine. What a kind and generous man you are. Mr. Fujikara beamed. His friends looked suitably impressed. Mr. Fujikara, you are indeed one of my favorites. I leaned over and planted a kiss on his cheek.
Now, it is but a small thing, he stammered.
I rose as Kimmy arrived with the champagne. Gentlemen, enjoy. I smiled and bowed at Mr. Fujikara. I'll look forward to seeing you soon. Perhaps dinner this week sometime?" I thought I caught a wink as he nodded in return. Waving Kimmy away, he turned to his friends and proffered the bottle of champagne.
"Let's drink."
He popped the cork and began to pour. They all stood and bowed as I took my leave. It was very awkward, all this bowing. I'd never gotten used to it. Finally, I turned and tottered toward the steps. I almost made it to the casino floor. On the next to the last step, my ankle twisted. I yelped and grabbed for the rail, which slipped by, just out of reach. I started to fall. Out of nowhere, a pair of strong hands grabbed me.
"Whoa, steady there."
I looked up into the twinkling eyes of Paxton Dane, eyes that took in my cleavage and my fuck-me shoes.
"Very nice,"
he said as he easily set me straight.
"And well played."
He cocked his head in the direction of Mr. Fujikara, who, thankfully, was out of earshot.
"Would you like to practice on me sometime?"
Intensely aware of the warmth of his hands on my bare arms, my heart tripped. What is it with my taste in men? Regaining my balance, if not my pride, I stepped away from him and smoothed my dress. "That's just a game Mr. Fujikara and I play."
"And you played him pretty well,"
Dane smirked. "I've had a lot of practice." I grabbed his elbow and drew him into the crowd and away from the bar. I looked back at Mr. Fujikara and his friends. They were laughing. Mr. Fujikara caught my eye and raised his glass in a silent toast. I smiled and nodded in return. I helped him be a big man in front of his friends. What's so bad about that? Realizing I still had hold of Dane's arm, I let go and stepped back.
"If word of your personal touch gets out, we may have a rash of whales with fender benders."
"Not likely. Now, how do we go about finding a missing helicopter?"
"Want to go for a ride?"
Dane asked. "Don't tell me you found it already." Just thinking about getting my hands around Willie's neck made me salivate.
"Unfortunately, no. But my contact arranged for us to view the videotapes of tonight's air traffic at the control tower at McCarran. Maybe we can figure out where the pilot went."
"I'm in, but I've got to do a couple of things first. Can we meet out front in half an hour?"
"You got it."
I watched Dane walk away. When he was out of earshot, I keyed my Nextel. "Jer, what do you have on the Mega Millions lady?"
"Mrs. Paisley? The tapes and machine are in agreement. She only played 2 quarters.
"What did she win?"
$365,000.
Not a bad payday, but nowhere near the $85 million she would have won had she played 6 quarters. And I was going to be the bearer of the bad news. On nights like this, being the messenger not only put me in the line of fire, but also put me in a bad mood.
"You want me to tell her?"
Jerry asked. "You're a sweetheart, but this is what I get paid for." Reluctantly, I headed for the elevators. Soon I was standing in front of the gilded double doors of the Sodom and Gomorrah suite. One of our best suites, it encompassed half of the top floor along the northwest wing. With its 3 bedrooms, great room with a bar, dining room for private dinners, and a large Roman-inspired bath with a hot tub for you and 10 of your closest friends, the suite was a favorite with the Hollywood and professional athlete crowds. Decorated in an over-the-top Egyptian motif, with gold columns, huge potted palms, and clouds painted on the ceiling, the suite reminded me of the set of an old Egyptian horror movie. I had no idea how anyone could sleep in there. Not that anyone spent much time sleeping in Vegas. In my opinion, the view was the best part, looking straight up the strip. I so didn't want to do this. The big boss would probably fire me if he knew how badly I wanted to give away $85 million. I forced myself to pull the rope beside the door. Deep inside, a bell chimed. I stepped back, half expecting a tall, scantily dressed Nubian to appear at my summons. Instead, the lady who opened the door couldn't have been even a fraction over 5 feet tall, and she was most definitely not Nubian. She was more like Middle North American. Almost as wide as she was tall, she sported a cap of graying curls and the best set of dimples I'd seen in quite a while. Wrapped in one of the Babylon's terrycloth robes, which looked to be about 3 sizes too large, sleeves rolled up and hem dragging on the ground, her feet bare and her eyes bright, the little lady flashed a big smile. "Mrs. Paisley?" I asked.
"For heaven's sake, call me Velma. Mrs. Paisley is, or was, my mother-in-law."
She stepped back, opening the door wider and motioning me inside.
"You must have drawn the short straw."
"I'm Lucky O'Toole, and I'm in charge of customer relations here at the Babylon. My job entails a lot of short straws."
"It can't be much fun coming to tell me I didn't win the 85 million.
So she knew. No, this is not one of the better parts of my job. Her 3 friends, also dressed in oversized robes, gathered around us. They all looked flushed, as if they'd been enjoying the hot tub.
"Goodness,"
she laid a hand on my arm.
"Don't worry yourself. I knew I had only played 2 quarters. I'd been playing 6 most of the evening, but then, about a half hour before I hit, I switched to 2 quarters per pull." "How much did you win, Velma?"
asked one of her friends. All eyes swiveled to me. $365,000, I said.
"That's wonderful."
Mrs. Paisley positively beamed.
"After taxes, that should be almost enough to get my grandson through Harvard."
"You have a grandson at Harvard?" I asked.
"Not yet. He's applied, but hasn't heard. He's wanted to go there practically forever."
"You don't seem upset about hitting the big one, but not winning the 85 million. Mrs. Paisley held onto my arm as she directed me to a couch in the great room. I took a peek at the fabulous view. The lights of the Strip stretched off into the distance. For some reason, I felt like shouting, "I'm king of the world!" But that had already been done.
"Sit, Miss O'Toole. May I offer you a drink?"
"Please, call me Lucky. Perhaps a small one." I was entitled to a drink. I'd spent the better part of the last 16 hours at work, above and beyond by anyone's definition. But I hadn't eaten in a while, so the drink had better be small, or I'd find myself sleeping it off in a stairwell, just like our naked guy. At the clap of Mrs. Paisley's small hands, a buff blonde guy dressed in a loincloth appeared.
"Chad, bring Miss O'Toole whatever she wants."
Mrs. Paisley sounded imperious and impish at the same time. Who wouldn't enjoy having a buff-bodied Chad waiting to grant their every wish? "Scotch, neat." Chad nodded and disappeared. Mrs. Paisley settled in next to me. Her friends took the chairs across from us.
85 million is a life-changing amount,"
Mrs. Paisley announced.
"Some lives don't need that much changing. Mine's one of them. Mr. Paisley left me well taken care of. After he passed, I was bored, so I started baking pies for the local restaurants back in my hometown of Griffin, Indiana. Do you know of it?"
I shook my head. "Sorry, no." Chad reappeared with my drink. I took a long sip, gasping as the liquid burned down my throat.
"It's a small town, mostly farming folk, but we're on Interstate 70, so we get a fair amount of traffic."
Mrs. Paisley wiggled like a puppy, clearly enjoying her moment in the spotlight.
"My pies were pretty popular, and then Margaret over there," she pointed to one of the ladies sitting opposite us. "Well, she was taking names of the out-of-towners who would call asking for us to send them a pie. After the names started adding up, she convinced me, and Paisley Pies was born."
"Paisley Pies?"
"We're small, but growing. All my kids and most of my grandkids, at one time or another, have worked with me. My friends process the orders and handle all of the shipping. According to my grandson, I even have a web presence. I'm not sure what that means, but he seems thrilled. And the orders are increasing almost faster than we can keep up. So, Lucky, what more could I possibly want?"
"You're a real glass-half-full kind of woman, aren't you?" I took another sip of my scotch, enjoying the warmth, as much from Mrs. Paisley as the alcohol, spreading through me.
Most folks only think about what they don't have. I know what I've got. 85 million wouldn't make it any better.
I patted Mrs. Paisley's knee. You are a breath of fresh air, and you have made my night. I pulled one of my cards out of my pocket and turned it over. Does anyone have a pen? I put my drink down on the side table. I'd just about polished it off. One of the ladies found a pencil and handed it to me. Velma, what's your grandson's name? I asked, pencil poised. The one who wants to go to Harvard.
Pete. Peter Paisley IV. He's named after my late husband and the other Paisley men before him.
I noted his name and put the card in my pocket. Ladies, I must go. Meeting you has restored my faith in humanity. Please order anything you want from the restaurant or partake of any of the spa treatments. On the house with my compliments. Chapter 3. I ducked into my office. A change of shoes was definitely in order. As I suspected, Miss Patterson still manned her desk. Her eyes twinkled as she handed me my flats. I trust everything went smoothly with Mr. Fujikara. I nodded, and with a grateful sigh, I sank into the chair opposite her desk. A bit more expensive than I thought it would be. Can you believe that little shyster tagged me for 2 bottles of very nice wine and a bottle of Dom Perignon? I could take lessons from him, she said. I snorted. Be careful. You just might clever yourself right out of a job. We both knew it was a hollow threat. I've spent the last hour cleaning up your email. You had another job offer from the Athena. The salary and benefits they're offering border on the obscene. My salary is already off the charts. The big boss will have to fire me if he wants to get rid of me. This is my home. I'm here to stay. She visibly sighed with relief. I prepared your response, but I haven't sent it. A simple thank you, but hell no will do. She smiled. I figured that's what you'd say. My feet practically shouted with glee as I tucked them back into my comfy flats. You know me well. Now go home. I don't want to see your frowning face for at least 12 hours. Are you going home as well? Soon, God willing. But I have to swing by the airport first. Oh, before you leave, could you have Paolo meet us down front? Paolo drove one of the company limos, and he usually worked the graveyard shift. Us? Paxton Dane is going with me. Paolo can be my chaperone. I had no intention of riding around Vegas at this hour of the morning, alone with Paxton Dane. Like I said, after midnight, I have no self-control. I see. Miss Patterson's expression didn't change. That could salvage the evening. Mr. Dane is a tasty bit of eye candy. I think I'll leave that comment alone. Weak, I know, but my skills suffer when I'm low on fuel and it's late in the game. With a bland expression, but victory in her eyes, Miss Patterson handed me the satchel I called my purse. It actually was a prized possession. An Hermes Birkin bag. Obscenely expensive, sickeningly fashionable. It had been a gift from the big boss. Jerry's package is in your bag, and the beautiful Jeremy Whitlock will be by tomorrow afternoon around 2. Right, thanks. And what about Felicia Riley? I assume she isn't on the property, or she would be here. She called in sick. When was her shift to start? Midnight. I see, I replied, but I didn't see it all. Another piece to the puzzle, but I had no idea how it fit. Thanks again. And remember, 12 hours. Go home. Get some rest. I charged through the office door and raced for the elevator. Paxton Dane was waiting just outside the front entrance. He gave me the once-over as I walked up. Your car or mine? And for the record, I like the other shoes better. You don't have to walk in them. I breezed past him and motioned to Paolo. You probably drive an old pickup with a gun rack and a coonhound slobbering out the window. Let's take the company car. I didn't look at Dane as he stepped to the curb beside me. Something about the man kept me just a bit off balance. He practically oozed sex. I remembered the feel of his chest, his hands on my arms, his breath on my cheek. I may have sworn off men, but my body apparently hadn't gotten the memo. My mind wasn't exactly cooperating either. A sleek black limo eased to a stop in front of us. Paolo jumped out and ran around the car to greet us.
Miss O'Toole, what a pleasure.
I liked Paolo, but like a bright light, I could take him only in small doses. Dark and Latin, he had so much energy he seemed to bounce when he walked. Sporting an ever-ready smile, he opened the back door with the flourish of a matador taunting a bull. Paolo, how are Maria and little Javier?
Miss O'Toole, you are so kind to remember my family,
Paolo gushed.
They are wonderful. Thank you.
I ducked inside the cavernous automobile. I've never felt comfortable in the back of a limo. They were for celebrities and people trying to attract attention, and I struck out on both counts. Dane took the seat directly across from me, so now I had to look at him or out the window. Great. Before Paolo could shut the door, I remembered the little elephant the big boss had given me. I pulled it out of my pocket. Here's something for Javier. Paolo took it gently.
Thank you, Miss O'Toole.
You're welcome. We need to go to the control tower at the airport. Do you have any idea how to get there?
I will find it. You can trust Paolo.
As the car eased away from the curb, I leaned back and shut my eyes. That way I avoided looking at anything. The little headache that was forming earlier behind my right eye had bloomed into a thumper. The whiskey had left a bilious brew in the pit of my stomach, and I was hungry. I bet the three were related. Without opening my eyes, I found the intercom button. Paolo, are we too late to make a swing through In-N-Out before they close?
They turn out the lights at 1:30. We should be able to get to the one on Maryland Parkway by then.
See if you can make it. I'm starved. I opened one eye and looked at Dane. He was watching me with a bemused expression on his face. What? You don't mind, do you?
Now that you ask, no.
The lights were still on when we pulled into the drive-thru. Maybe my luck was turning. I was about due for something to go my way. I pressed the intercom switch. Paolo, I want a combo with a large Diet Coke. Oh, and make it animal style. I let off the switch. Dane, what do you want?
I've never done animal style,
he answered, his face an inscrutable mask. I'll bet. He was just the sort who'd want to do the doggy. God, was my brain determined to stay in the gutter when I was around him? Animal style generally means they add grilled onions. What do you want? I was way too smart to ask him what he wanted to eat.
What are my choices? I've never dined at this fine establishment.
I leaned back and watched him as he perused the limited menu. Don't let appearances deceive you. In-N-Out is a mecca. 3 times a day, junk food addicts prostrate themselves in front of the counter, willing to sell their grandmothers for a burger animal style.
You mean hamburgers aren't just for breakfast anymore?
He fired back with a grin. This is Vegas. We don't eat meals here. We grab food when we can find it.
When in Rome,
he said with a smile.
Animal style it is.
I depressed the intercom switch again. Okay, Paolo. Make that 2 number 1 combos, animal style, both with large drinks. Mine's a Diet Coke, and Dane wants... I cocked an eyebrow at him.
Do they have Dr. Pepper?
And Dane's will be a Dr. Pepper. Then order whatever you want. I dove into my Birkin, rooting around for my wallet. Dane stopped me.
Here.
He pulled a couple of crumpled 20s out of his pants pocket.
Allow me.
I didn't come up for air until I had inhaled half my burger and almost all of my fries.
Impressive.
Dane, a half-eaten burger in his hands, watched me with a look of wry amusement and awe. Lunch was a long time ago. I could feel the heat rise in my face. Eating in front of people was hard for me. I'd never been petite or small, or even medium-sized. In Las Vegas, a city where all the Barbie-sized clothes sell out first, I was a giant living in the land of the munchkins. Of course, when I deigned to shop, I had no trouble finding clothes in my size, which was a plus, literally. A saleslady once told me they stocked my size for the transvestites. I took another bite of hamburger. Besides, In-N-Out burgers and fries are 2 of the 4 major food groups.
And the other 2 food groups would be?
Krispy Kreme donuts and any kind of M&Ms. Dane threw back his head and laughed.
I like a woman who relishes her food. Those dainty little eaters who order a whole meal, then push it around their plate, aren't for me. If you can add barbecue and beer to your list, we could be good friends.
Damn. Now, along with lusting after him, I was starting to like the guy. For sure he'd turn out to be a bum. It never failed. A list to horrify a cardiologist. I guess we'll die young, but happy. He tucked into his fries with gusto. McCarran Airport fronted the southern end of the Strip on the east side. The airport worked in opposite rhythm to the city. When night fell, the Strip fired up and the airport wound down. Few flights operated at this time of the morning, although there were the obligatory red-eyes to the East Coast and Hawaii. Paolo found the control tower in the web of access roads and runways and pulled into the parking lot. I rolled down my window, stuck my head out, and looked at the dark tower looming above us. So, what do we do? Knock 3 times and ask to see the wizard?
Do you ever turn it off?
Dane asked. I donned my most innocent expression. What?
Never mind.
Dane wadded up the refuse from his meal and stuffed it back in the sack.
Coming?
He asked, as Paolo opened the door. Dane unfolded himself from the back of the limo and extended his hand to help me out. I let him help me out of the car on the off chance he might turn out to be one of us good guys.
We aren't exactly going up to the tower, he said. We are going down to Las Vegas Tracon.
I love it when you talk dirty. Jesus, was I flirting with him? He shot me a grin. And what is Tracon going to tell us? I asked, forcing my mind back to the business at hand. He shrugged.
Don't know. The radar tracking files may show us where our helicopter went after depositing Lida Sue in the Pirates' Lagoon.
He identified himself into a speaker beside the door, then it opened. I followed him down the stairs to the basement. Tracon was housed in a large windowless room that reminded me of a huge, darkened theater. 2 banks of computers were arranged in concentric semicircles. In the dark, I could just make out several hunched-over figures, their faces illuminated by the displays in front of them. The figures spoke into headsets, their voices modulated, so they blended into an indistinguishable background murmur. Additional displays hung at intervals on the wall, each showing various symbols that looked to me like Sanskrit or Klingon. "Beam me up, Scotty," I muttered, unable to help myself.
"Behave,"
Dane whispered through clenched teeth.
"These folks take their jobs seriously."
"Oh, sorry." Pricked by his chiding, I feigned sincerity. I must have missed the no humor sign.
You clearly missed the no sarcasm sign as well.
Dane shot me a dirty look.
"Stay here. I'll be right back,"
he ordered, as he took off like a scalded dog, making straight for a guy sitting behind a desk in the far corner. Clearly, Dane thought there was no need to inflict me on an unsuspecting civil servant. Once in a while, I had to agree with his judgment. I held up the wall near the stairs. From here, I could watch Dane unobserved. He was bent over a display, his ass pointed in my direction. My mind was just beginning to wander into forbidden territory when my Nextel vibrated at my hip. I was smart enough to have put it on silent. Its normal wail would shatter the silence in this techie mausoleum. Everyone in the joint would probably have a coronary, and planes would fall out of the skies. I pushed to talk as I bounded up the stairs, 2 at a time. "Hang on," I whispered. I raced up the stairs and back outside, and stuck a foot between the door and the door jamb so I didn't get locked out. "O'Toole here."
"Hey, Lucky. Where you at?"
Jerry was apparently pulling the night shift in security. "I'm hot on the trail of a missing helicopter."
"Then you're gonna like this. I just got a call from some irate Mexican dude. He kept cussing at me in Spanish like I was too stupid to understand."
Jerry chuckled.
"The dude was really hot. Even I learned a few words."
I gritted my teeth and kept quiet. Jerry loved to string me along when he had something really good to tell me.
"Anyway, it seems this guy works as security at Spanish Trail," he continued.
I couldn't stand it any longer. "Jer, I'm getting older by the minute."
"Right. Our missing helicopter is sitting on the 9th green of the Lakes Golf Course at Spanish Trail Golf and Country Club. Doors are unlocked, but no pilot. I promised the security guy $100 for not calling the police."
"I could kiss you." I reclipped the Nextel just as Dane materialized at my elbow.
"Who could you kiss?" he asked.
"Jerry, he found something for me. Did you find out anything from Captain Kirk in there?"
"I'll show you mine if you show me yours,"
Dane said with an evil grin. "Okay, smartass. You first." We both walked toward the waiting limo.
"It seems our boy circled around for a while after the gal took a header. Then he asked for clearance to Northtown."
"Northtown?" I asked, as Dane waved Paolo away and opened my door. We both settled in, this time side by side.
"North Las Vegas Airport, a general aviation field off Rancho."
"I know the place."
"My buddy checked with their tower. It seems the chopper landed there, but only stayed for a few minutes. The guys in the tower either couldn't see or didn't notice whether anyone got on or off. Once he was airborne again, they cleared him to the west. From there, the trail goes cold. After the chopper exited the airport's airspace, the pilot turned off his transponder and disappeared off the radar."
"Transponder?" I asked, then thought better of it. I could get a lesson in air traffic control some other time. "Never mind."
"Now I get to see yours," Dane reminded me.
"Well," I said, as I settled into the deep seat, "before I turn my cards over, I call and raise you one dinner at the restaurant of my choice." He whistled.
"It must be good."
He narrowed his eyes as he looked at my face.
"Or you're bluffing."
He waited a moment, then said,
"Okay, I'll play. What do you have?"